views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of Bronxnet or the program underwriters.
Hey there, welcome to the Bronx Buzz. This is Bronxnet's program where we talk to journalists, writers, editors, photographers, videographers, filmmakers, and I said that with emphasis for a reason. And we try to give you some insight as to what they're thinking about, what they're working on, and give you some kind of behind-the-scenes look at what's going on in all aspects of Bronx media. This evening, we are thrilled because we have a filmmaker who has a film that everybody's starting to whisper about. It is actually not about the Bronx, but if you look at it like this, it is about the Bronx. And so let me say good evening and welcome to Pam Spoor. Nice to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
So the film is called Detroit 48202. And I am going to assume, because it's a film about a postal worker, that this is a zip code in Detroit.
It is a zip code in Detroit.
Give us a little background about the film, and then I want to talk a little bit about your background and why is a Bronx girl doing a film about Detroit?
Okay. Well, this Bronx girl who has deep roots in the Bronx also has deep roots in Detroit. I grew up in Detroit, and this film is basically my love letter to the city that helped shape me. It's a way to look at what happened to my city in terms of the devastation, the economic decline, the structural racism, the legacy of segregated neighborhoods, and the legacy of people fighting for equality in housing, in jobs, in education. And so my approach to this film was to turn to a high school friend who, at the point I started, had been on the postal route for 25 years. And I said, Wendell, can I follow you around your route and kind of eavesdrop on what you talk about with your customers for a week? And I'll kind of create a picture of what's going on, what has happened, and what the future is of Detroit.
Well, you saw my reaction. I was not on camera at that moment when you started talking about all the aspects of what happened in Detroit during that time. I mean, I'm doing my checklist, and every one of those items applies, of course, to the borough of the Bronx. Mm-hmm. And so that was the first thing. The second thing that I did want to mention, the selection of a postal worker is a very good one because who knows our neighborhoods better, right? He or she, of course, goes from building to building, gets to know the people, may even have an idea what kind of mail they get. And so I just think it's a brilliant exercise and a brilliant choice of what to do. And I will say, normally we might not look at a film about Detroit and bring it on Bronx Buzz and Bronxnet, but because of the things you said link up so well, it's been shown in the Bronx and it's perfect for the Bronx. Talk a little bit about your background. And so you said grew up in Detroit, but I know you have a long history of work and living in the Bronx. Talk to me a little bit about your background that people would be interested in.
Okay, so my father grew up in the Bronx and went to school in the Bronx.
Oh, can we ask what neighborhood?
He grew up on 179th and Arthur Avenue.
Got it.
Went to school at whatever that
That's
elementary.
All right.
Anyway,
I just wanted to make the point.
My parents moved upstate. This is a long story. My parents moved upstate to Buffalo to be political organizers in the 50s. My father was a victim of McCarthyism, and so searching for jobs, Wayne State University in Detroit was the only college in the whole United States that would hire him. So we moved to Detroit when I was 9 years old.
And you got a lesson in social justice from a very early age.
From a very early age. And then the city, Detroit, gave us refuge, where my father created a career at Wayne State University. We lived in integrated neighborhoods in the city of Detroit, and although there was a lot of course, segregation in the city, my parents selected a neighborhood that allowed us to go to school and be friends with Black American, white, and also the Arab population in the city of Detroit. So that mixed with the tremendous history of labor activism, anti-racist activism. It was such an
you understood
education.
it.
It was a formation that was so
Just talk about your
important.
own background, if you would. You said you taught in the Bronx, and you
So
really have good Bronx roots.
Right, so I came to New York City as a college student, and then got a degree in bilingual education, and I really learned to teach in the 11 years that I spent at Satellite Academy High School in the Bronx. And shout out to anyone out there who was at the Schaumburg Satellite Academy in the Bronx.
Okay.
Tremendous experience. I learned how to be a teacher there. And that's where I discovered the power of doing video documentaries with high school students. And so from about 1989 on to 2011, when I retired from the DOD, the DOE, I worked with high school students facilitating their creation of social justice documentaries.
And that timing is very perfect. In other words, it's synced up very well with when video was created. And so you're like, well, what vehicle can I use to tell these stories? And there it was. All of a sudden they had 3/4 inch tape, and then they had beta tape. And of course now we have incredible digital technology. What I want to do is show a clip of, we're going to show the trailer of the film, and then we'll talk about where people might get to see it, et cetera, et cetera. Do you want to say anything before we see the trailer?
Just I'd echo what you said about that it doesn't take place in the Bronx, but it's related to issues in the Bronx in terms of, if you look at the redlining maps, there's a redlining map for almost any city you can imagine. So the policy, the federal and local policies that created the housing conditions and the segregation that we're living the legacy of, and the policies of urban renewal. You'll find a highway going through a black neighborhood and destroying it in many cities across.
Gee, I wonder if we have that here.
So,
yeah,
so the disinvestment, the planned disinvestment.
What I
is the same
saw, in
policy.
fact, I saw some of the buildings look like Bronx buildings. All right, here we go. Detroit, I want to get the zip code right, 48202. All right, by Pam Spoor. Let's take a look.
My name is Wendell Watkins. I'm a mail carrier around this area.
How many houses have you seen come and go?
You get so used to this stuff, you don't realize how much stuff is messed up until you walk with somebody that's not from around here. These corporations buy up places, so then they just board it up and hold it for speculation.
It's like the fault of people who made decisions decades before.
The Sojourner Truth Homes were opened in 1942.
We moved out to Sojourner Truth Project.
She was one of the first group.
We were the first group that ever moved in. The whites didn't want our color to live out there.
This is the wall that used to demarcate where they're going to have the white neighborhood from the black neighborhood. Separate but not equal.
You didn't go past 8 Mile, you stayed over here.
You didn't even think
6
about
Mile,
it.
yeah.
If you look at the records, you'll find folder after folder of African Americans that had been harassed by the police. Detroit lost 130 to 140,000 auto industry jobs.
You layer on top of that racial conflict, and you have the recipe for a disaster.
People that started gathering on 12th Street and started bricking them, and the rebellion had broke out.
Hey, the motor city is burning, y'all. That must have been something, man, to see all this stuff going on. I was there when it was a kid got shot.
I remember the National Guard coming in. I remember seeing men in uniforms with these big guns.
When the rebellion was over, we had so many 50 caliber machine gun shells. We picked them all up and we used them for necklaces.
That ain't right. Worst anger I feel about this whole situation about Detroit going down is the fact that it's the audacity of these guys that have just taken all they could out of the city, and then turning around and even giving people the impression that it's their fault.
To do these kinds of histories is healing work. It's healing to tell children, this is not you.
Well, there you go. Congratulations
Thank
to
you.
Pam Sporn about, I was going to say, finding a Bronx film in another city, because obviously there are so many things people in the Bronx can relate to. Just talk about the making of the film, the collecting of the archival footage and things like that. A difficult process, something undoubtedly you worked hard at.
It's challenging. Doing the archival research is one of the things that I've always loved about documentary
there you
film.
go.
So it's detective work. It's also listening closely to the people that you're interviewing. It's knowing the history. You have to know the history to know what kind of images that will tell it. And so that's the first step.
Well, you know, you and I were talking beforehand about Decade of Fire, which in a way is similar, tells a similar story. And in that film and in their trailer, for people who want to go to Decade of Fire and see it, they actually say, this isn't the only city it happened, here's proof. And what I love is a Bronx filmmaker was elsewhere and turned it around. Now, when and where, now it was shown at the Bronx Documentary Center, and what are the prospects for everybody to get to see it?
We just had a wonderful screening at the Bronx Documentary Center. Right. We had a screening at BAM, Brooklyn Academy of Music, and we're working with some community folks to hopefully show it at one of the parks in the Bronx. A local park, like do an outdoor park thing? Indoor, or possibly like in a rec center in July. So I can definitely keep folks.
We want to know.
The film is distributed by New Day Films, newday.com, which is a filmmaker owned distribution co-op marketing to the university market. So if there are educators out there, please check out New Day Films.
New Day Films. The film is Detroit 48202. Now I'm going to go to Detroit. I'm going to look for that zip code. Last question, what's next? Do you know yet? Or are you just working like crazy on this?
I'm working to promote this, but I have some ideas are percolating.
She's not telling us. Pam Spoor, congratulations
Thank you so much, Gary. Thanks so much.
Doing a wonderful, wonderful, educational, informative, exhilarating work about our lives, even though it's our friends and neighbors all the way 1,200 miles away or something.
Right.
Anyway, not that far?
No.
Oh, how far is it?
I think it's like 600 miles.
600 miles?
miles?
I don't know. It felt like 1,200. Anyway, we'll be right back. David Cruz from the Norwood News will join us in a moment.
Okay, good. Thanks a lot.
Sure, I look cute now, but when my owner lost his job, it was rough. I was living on the street, and one night, me and this Cocker Spaniel got into it so bad, I wound up looking like an ice cream cone. I cried a little bit, but thankfully I got rescued, so I'm running, I'm jumping, all back to my old self, and I'm ready to give unconditional love, even if you put a lampshade on my head.
It's not always easy being a dad.
Do you have panda asthma too? Does that run in the family? This is the home of the most priceless kung fu artifacts.
But when you make an effort...
Dad, we're not supposed to touch anything. Oh, sorry. Go along, son!
It's always worth it.
Whoa!
The smallest moments can have the biggest impact on a child's life. Take time to be a dad today.
I am gonna get you. I'm gonna get you.
Call 877-4DAD-411 or visit fatherhood.gov to learn more.
You know what, guys? There's a lot of tree branches and dry brush over here. We should probably move the bonfire over there.
I'm guessing Smokey liked that idea.
Hey, it's Ava, and this is Tess from Vivo's Do It Yourselfie, where we recreate the hottest looks from today's biggest music videos.
After cleaning out our closet, we have a lot of clothes we don't wear anymore.
Like this old t-shirt.
It's not garbage, it's actually a brand new rug.
And to make it, all you need to do is cut, tie, and glue.
Cut the t-shirt into strips.
Tie the strips into knots.
And glue the knots to the bath mat. I love it. Give your garbage another life.
And recycle.
Hey, back with you on the Bronx Buzz. Wasn't that great? Fantastic. And now we're going to see if David Cruz of the Norwood News can top that. He didn't bring a film with him.
No.
Nice to have you with us, David.
How you doing, Gary? Thanks.
Nice to have you back. A lot going on. Let's start with, I guess, the most current in this whole idea that the state legislature passed rent reform, I guess, a day or two ago. And this really is a landmark moment in the history of housing in the Bronx and in New York City. You want to talk a little bit about it?
It's significant for the Bronx because out of the 1 million rent-regulated apartments here in New York City, the Bronx has the most. And so the Bronx will probably be impacted the most from the package of bills. And people were focusing on 9 bills altogether, but there's a huge slew of other bills that haven't gotten the same kind of media attention that it deserves. But the 9 bills that were passed, I think with the exception of the good cause eviction bill, which won't have too much of a significant impact. But the preferential vacancy bonuses were gone, preferential rent will be stabilized, and the big one, although it's not much of a win, but it's sort of like significantly weakened, is these MCIs, major capital improvements, where landlords pass on the cost of improvements to the tenants. Now they're going to be capped at 2% instead of 6% of a rent increase that a tenant would be exposed to.
If you look at many buildings in the Bronx, many of them you've covered landlords who have been derelict about their responsibilities with buildings. Sometimes you see things like all the plumbing needs to be replaced,
right.
All the heating needs to be replaced. The property owners, either correctly or incorrectly, say, "What do you expect us to do?" And they generally pass along the cost. I think this will be a very interesting economic balance, because will landlords then really do the work? I mean, or will they complain and say, "Look, we can't do it because we can't earn our keep"? That's what their allegation has been all along.
Well, the package of bills is definitely not on the side of the landlords, although I think they're really, in a way, they're kind of being strong-armed into making sure that they do right by their tenants. And, if it means they have to take out a loan, or if it means that they have to, perhaps just drain their wallets to actually make sure that the buildings are in good shape, then that's how it has to be. I mean, these tenants have been sort of suffering for decades when you really think about it.
There is, in a way, a line drawn in the sand that says, you know what, now you've been saying that you haven't been able to afford it, and if they don't do it, we'd like to think that there's enough oversight and there are enough inspectors to go around to say, wait a minute, you didn't do it, rather than have tenants live in substandard buildings, but then draw the line and either foreclose the buildings or do something with it, do a receivership of some sort to let the landlords know it has to be done.
But just to let you know too, I mean, they're already existing tenants pro-tenant laws in the books that kind of just help tenants sort of stay in their homes, even as they're fighting their landlord. They could withhold their rent.
Right.
They could do a whole slew of things now.
And there's no way to look at it other than because there was now a Democratic majority in the Senate and, of course, a Democratic majority in the Assembly and a Democratic governor, this really fueled the possibility.
Absolutely,
right?
Yeah.
All right, speaking of politics, David, now did you write this headline? Here's the question. Will the Bronx elect a cowboy-hatted congressman? Here's the printed out version, and of course they're referring to Reverend Ruben Diaz Sr. Did you write that headline?
No,
okay.
City and State wrote that headline.
David has a feature piece in City and State, and he analyzed, at least to this point, the race for the 15th Congressional District with the retiring Jose Serrano. I think it's, and I've covered this for a very long time, this is one of the most fascinating campaigns and races to come around. What are your thoughts, partially based on what you wrote?
I mean, it's definitely not, that district, the 15th Congressional District, hasn't seen a primary in almost 30 years, at least a real contentious primary. You have really 4 big names, or 3 big names right now. The fourth one is still a little bit on the fence.
Who knows side.
Well, it's Senator Gustavo Rivera who did open a committee, but he hasn't formally declared. So there's that. But the other ones are Councilman Ruben Diaz Sr., Councilman Richie Torres, and Assemblyman Michael Blake. All of them have name recognition, and so the article essentially just breaks down what can make them a viable candidate to win. Of course, the political insiders that I spoke to essentially say that Diaz, even though he makes a lot of crazy head-scratching comments, really does have a shot, given the fact that the district is 2/3 Hispanic, and ethnic politics will likely play into this type of a race. And also, he's well known compared to, say, someone like Councilman Torres and Assemblyman Blake. Even though they've been around for several years, Councilman Diaz has been around for decades. And of course, there's also the older population within that district as well that may gravitate towards someone who's in the 70s.
Given the nature of this seat, this is not for a city council seat or a state seat. This is for a federal seat, so therefore it has national implications. The idea for the GOP that they could take probably the most liberal seat in the nation over the last 20 plus years and turn it over to what he calls a conservative Democrat like Reverend Diaz, that would be very interesting. So my question is, do you think the National Republican Party will put some money into this, will put some effort into this, and try and help the conservative Democrat win that seat?
I think it's conceivable, but at the same time, I think they're really looking to flip more, purple seats at this point, because, Diaz is
getting that one seat in the Bronx won't mean that much.
Won't really have that much of an impact.
The other political question, and I asked, as I think I asked Richie Torres this when he was on Bronx Talk, if in fact, let's say Gustavo Rivera runs, you mentioned Marlene Cintrone from the BOEDC. Now all of a sudden you've got 5 candidates, 4 of whom one would think politically are in the same place with a very similar appeal. Do you think that splits the vote? And then will the Bronx elect a cowboy-hatted congressman comes true because that vote is split?
Yeah, I mean, everyone...
You think that's possible?
That is possible, just given the politics of for each of the candidates. Blake and Torres and even Senator Gustavo Rivera are pretty much self-proclaimed progressives, and they do have a very progressive agenda, which doesn't necessarily may not translate well with folks who live in that district. There are some pockets that are socially conservative, and so he may very well cause these guys to, cancel each other out.
It is a fascinating race, and the fundraising capabilities. I mean, Assemblyman Blake has national associations with the Democratic National Party. Richie Torres has been a top flight council member, certainly one who's at the upper echelon in the city council, and so he clearly has support. And let's say Marlene Cintrone runs. I mean, one would think would have the support of the borough president. You don't know. But then, of course, does he then support his own father? That's another whole dialogue. So fascinating race. Anything else you want to say about it before we move on?
Just the fact that even though it's like it's more than a year away. It is.
I know we're really going nuts. It's not till next June. It's literally 12 months away.
Right. It will definitely still be a very closely watched race, especially after July 15th when the filing comes out.
And there are no this has come up in dialogue here because we've been usually make our choices now of what debates we want to do. There's really nothing going on politically in the Bronx other than this. Maybe that's why it's getting attention.
Well, possibly in August.
I am going to bring up the notion of Andy Cohen. He was on Bronx Talk the other night, and there's been talk for the last year and a half that he might. Now that he's term limited, might want a judgeship. How do you see that situation?
Well, I think if there's an opening, he would definitely take it, and he's actually told that to me openly. He would, he's
said it on Bronx Talk,
right?
Yeah.
He's open to the idea of just wanting to serve and be a public servant. So if the opportunity is there, which of course he technically doesn't necessarily have anything to do with it because a lot of this is just political machinations in play.
Yeah. It's like all of a sudden, wow, they just picked up my name. I don't know how they knew I was interested.
But this would essentially just be like deja vu all over again in the sense that was the plan back last year. It was, once the primary happened, they kind of scrapped that plan. And I think they're just, once the dust has settled, they're looking to revisit that again.
And I have to tell you, on some levels, you could criticize, let's say, the Democratic structure, the Democratic people, Assemblyman Marcos Crespo, who's the chair, and even some of the people involved. But this is the system. I mean, that is how it happens. I mean, you really don't have the same kind of campaigns for judge, even though they put them on the ballot, that you would have, for other seats. So,
Well, there's also plenty of judgeships to go around as opposed to, like, say, like, a legislator. Right, exactly.
That's actually a very good point. And that would open up, of course, there are two very high-profile announced candidates, Eric Dinowitz, the son of the Assemblyman, and Dan Paternak, former chair of Community Board 8, have both said they would run. You want to comment on that before I ask you about something else?
Just, I think that those, that race will be very closely watched, given the fact that it has two very viable candidates. It does have someone who is, technically part of the establishment, and someone who wants to view himself as a little bit of an outsider. So here we go again. It's like, who will the voters decide?
Well, that's I guess the beauty of campaigns. How much time left do we got? All right, just a minute or two. This saga of DeWitt Clinton High School and whether they're going to have a school added, which would be a special ed school, was finally answered, and the answer is yes. How do you see it? I mean, is this going to hurt a school that's been struggling even further?
To be honest with you, I'm going to say no. It's not just...
You don't think it will hurt the school?
No. I think this is more about the fact that the DeWitt Clinton legacy is sort of slowly being, erased. It's just the fact that at one point this was...
worn away, so to speak.
Exactly. And you have 3 schools in there. DeWitt Clinton High School used to be just one high school occupying that massive campus. And now
I
it's
am an alum,
down.
as you might recall.
And it's whittled down to just maybe having one floor. And so it's more just about where it was, where it is now, and whether it could ever get to that point that it used to be.
It seems, originally it was like, where are the seats? Is there room for them? It seems that
the DOE says yes.
At this point, it appears that there was empty space in the building, and it's a huge building, and so in that way, why not? Plus, you get into the whole question of, are people really kind of being nasty because it's special education? I wonder if
They're saying no. The advocates are saying no. It has nothing to do with it. Just any high school could have gone in there. It was just a matter of just reducing the space for DeWitt Clinton High School.
Last thing I want to ask is a similar thing. You wrote about it, and I want to ask about it. We asked Councilmember Cohen about, and that is this idea of a skate park in Williamsbridge Oval. Are we ever getting that skate park? I mean, the delays.
Right, it's pretty much delayed. It's been going on for years, and I guess these guys will just have to wait a little bit longer. But calls attention to the Parks Department and how they really go about.
Either they go about or they have the resources or not. Who knows? Right. David Cruz from the Norwood News, folks. Check out the Norwood News, norwoodnews.org. David does an unbelievable job, and he does a pretty good job on our show too. All right, thank you so much. Guess what? That's it. Oh, they're telling me to say good night. Good night. See you Monday on Bronx Talk.